Howdy, folks. Today's guest is very special because he was actually the first guest we ever had on the Camera Shake podcast. And it's been a great pleasure to have him back on the show after so many years. Who is it, I hear you ask? Well, you could go and check it out, or I could just tell you right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we get started, I've got one thing to ask of you. Over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not actually subscribed to this channel. Come on, folks, let's change that. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps us get amazing guests like today's guest on the show. One click, that is all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's welcome today's special guest, the multi-award-winning Peterborough-based wedding, portrait, and music photographer. Please welcome Mr. Dan Ackerley. Dan, dude, how's it going, man?
I'm good, dude. How are you?
I'm very well. It's honestly, it's so good to have you back on the show. Like 230 episodes later. Unbelievable, given that you were literally the first guest we ever had on the show.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of got out of hand, doesn't it, dude?
I mean, completely. It's got nuts.
Yeah, I actually completely forgot I was your first guest. That's amazing. So yeah, it's really good to be back. I've got one thing to say, though. I'm not actually based in Peterborough. I'm based closer to Cambridge. But you can say Peterborough. Say that in one.
Okay, cool. But the vast majority of our American audience are not even going to know where that is. Anyhow, it's actually, well, Greater London. So you don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and for all of those Europeans who basically, still believe that England just simply consists of London and there's nothing else. I've heard that many times before.
Well, the Watford Gap is the north, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, plus the Watford Gap is nowhere near Watford. That's another thing that confused me for years.
My mind, I only found that out recently, which is why I brought it up, actually. That's so strange.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And again, for those of you listening from abroad, the Watford Gap is basically, it's sort of it's a motorway, well, it's actually a motorway service station, really. But what happened there was when they built the first motorway in the UK, the M1, Motorway 1, so the first one, they started building it from two ends. So they started building from the north and they started building from the south, from London. And the place where they met, that's called the Watford Gap. The reason why that's called the Watford Gap is because it didn't line up. They got it wrong. And they ended up like, I don't know. Yeah, they ended up, that's why it's called the Gap, because they ended up like a few hundred yards or meters or whatever apart from each other. And you kind of go, well, the Romans managed to do it, guys. Come on.
Yep, fair point.
That's the thing. But yeah, so you were the first guest on the show. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember Nick and I did the very first episode, and it was just, him and me talking to each other. And then I remember thinking, well, it might be a good idea to have a guest on the show, because then and you're not ending up having the same conversation every week. And it'll be interesting because, you could talk to a wedding photographer or a portrait photographer or a landscape photographer, whatever, and you create a thing where actually you learn a lot. I know I've learned a ton of the last 230 something episodes. So yeah, give us sort of a brief overview over how your life and your photography has evolved since then, because the last time we spoke on the podcast, that was slap bang it was actually at the beginning of the pandemic, like in lockdown. And I think you were, other than redesigning your website, I think you were sort of looking into maybe doing some commercial photography as well. How have things changed since then?
Yeah, it's crazy, actually. I ended up being fairly busy over lockdown. I put together a quick a mini package based around the restrictions. I had a feeling that some people who'd been putting off getting married would probably get married, bearing in mind that they didn't have to invite people. They could do it a lot more affordable. And that proved to be true. So I ended up being fairly busy. I think I've shot over 20 weddings over the lockdown period when we were allowed to go out and then mingle with a few people. So that was quite good. I do some commercial work from time to time. I've got a handful of clients that I've had for quite a few years now. I don't push it that much. but I do regular work for these people, mostly based in Cambridge. And I've recently restarted doing a lot of music work as well. I took a step back from it because I got a bit too busy after lockdown ended, and we went back to normal. We went back to normal pretty quickly in this industry. In fact, I would say it was stranger than that, because most of us got even busier than we'd ever been before because of the backlog. And also a lot of people who saved money over lockdown decided to get married as soon as they came out of lockdown to have something to look forward to. So we actually had a mad year or two directly after lockdown, which actually a lot of people burnt themselves out a little bit, I think. And so I remember I've had so many conversations in the last year of photographers that stepped back a little bit. Because it got too much. It made us reevaluate things, and I certainly did. I've begun limiting the amount of weddings I do per year now, so I have a cap. Once I hit it, I'm happy with that. I won't push it more than that. Unless something really cool comes in and it's a little bit out of season, if you like. But yeah, I've got a number that I like to hit, and I'm happy with that. And it's given me a much better work-life balance than I had for quite a few years.
Because, I mean, you shoot a lot of weddings anyhow. And so I take it you were quite busy before lockdown. Then, of course, and I've heard this from many wedding photographer friends and stuff, is that a lot of people, obviously, during lockdown, sort of postponed their weddings. And that meant that the year after the pandemic, in a sense, all of a sudden it just all went crazy. Because not only did you have, a lot of people had bookings that were already made for whatever that year was, 2021 or something. But, yeah. But then they had to accommodate all of these postponed weddings as well. So it was like double trouble.
Yeah, that's why it got so mad, because, I mean, I like a lot of photographers, I lost some bookings because they moved to dates I then couldn't do. I think the thing that worked in our favour, especially if you're a busy photographer, is that the fact that most of the venues I shoot at are fairly busy too. And they were busy the year after as well. So the dates that these couples could move their dates to were kind of limited. So I end up, what would have been like an August Saturday became an April Tuesday or something. It got crazy. So I managed to accommodate the vast majority of my couples that moved their dates. Some of them I couldn't. Others, they were forced to kind of hang on and have their wedding just in the aftermath of lockdown, sort of being the restrictions being lifted when it wasn't fully open. And I think a lot of them would have preferred to have changed their dates, but I think it got to a point with venues where they couldn't really accommodate any more changes, so they have to hang on as long as they could before, when you start to second guess if there was going to be a further extension or they're going to start to relax the rules. It seems really strange talking about it now because I can barely remember it. Yeah. It's like a black out of my mind. It's so weird. It seems so long ago, and yet it feels like yesterday as well. So a lot of strange things happened around that time, and I find it really weird talking about it now.
Yeah, and luckily things have gone back to normal. Has your business changed at all because of the pandemic? I mean, other than sort of working off the backlog, have you sort of pivoted in a different direction? Has it changed in any way, or is it pretty much the same as it was before the pandemic?
I would say it's changed me. I think I changed. The better way to put it is my values, I think, have changed. I think what I find is important has changed. It's actually kind of strange you bring it up. It's a good question. I think that my shooting style has relaxed quite a bit because of it, which seems like a strange thing to say, but I've had a lot of time to think over lockdown about how I wanted to carry on in the industry in respect to style of photography. I'd gone down quite a heavy editorial route before then. I've since still got a little bit of an editorial edge to my work, but I've certainly gone down a more candid, natural, more documentary style with the vast majority of what I shoot at weddings as well. I don't call myself a documentary photographer because I still do kind of editorial style posy portraits of my couples. I'm happy to do that. They want me to do it. That's fine. I think if you get into that, when you start calling yourself a documentary photographer, you've got to be, predominantly documentary, which is a slightly different approach to mine. But it has changed the way I shoot. But I think the biggest thing I would say out of it is my work-life balance has completely changed. I've decided that I would rather work less and keep the quality of my work up than to just keep shooting. I mean, fair play to photographers that can just bang them out. People that are shooting 70, 80, 90 weddings a year. I used to do over 60 a year on average. I struggled a bit, if I'm honest, at certain points in the year. I've since gone back to restricting myself to only 40 weddings a year, and I'm probably going to go towards 35 soon. That for me is a really nice number. Also keeps me just under the VAT threshold, which helps.
Perfect.
which is the lovely first world problem, right? I don't know if that's going to continue, but it's certainly been the case for the last few years. And I only need 2 more bookings for next year to be fully booked as well, which is fantastic. So yeah.
That's amazing, because that's the sort of almost like the job security you really want, is like to know that you've got that coming in, over the next year or so.
Yeah, it's a strange industry we work in. I feel like in some respects, so compared to other kinds of photographers, I mean, if you're a commercial photographer predominantly, or you're doing products, things like that, you might not know where you're shooting until a few weeks before, sometimes the week before. And, I've got friends that work in that industry, and I just don't know if I could deal with that level of anxiety that they would create in my mind.
Yeah, that's me.
Well, I mean, that blows my mind. At least I've got some security, and I can look ahead sometimes a year, maybe a year and a half, where I can see that I've got work coming in. It certainly takes the edge off me being able to do other parts of photography, because it gives you that baseline, if you like, which is one of the reasons why I'm going to be pushing next year. I'm going to be pushing a little bit more stuff in the sense of like branding shoots and pushing the more commercial side of what I do, because I don't want all my eggs in one basket. But then again, I've been saying that for years, and yet I still keep getting the numbers I need for weddings, and I love doing them so much, and it allows me a nice quality of life, and it allows me to do other things. So I've got a lot of other interests outside of work and photography. So yeah.
Yeah, the eggs in one basket thing, that came and bit me in the ass, basically, at the with the pandemic. That was like, that was nuts. And yeah, and that first thought of like, okay, what am I going to do next? And then to think, oh, screw it, I'm just going to watch some Netflix for the next few weeks, and figure it out, and possibly start something like this podcast, which, to be honest with you, it was never. I mean, it was never a plan. I don't know. That was never a plan, actually. Just full stop. There was never really. The plan was not, all right, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to write this out to like 500 episodes or something. I think the plan at the time, both for Nick and I, actually was that just gives us something to do right now. And it helped us weather the storm. And from like, I think predominantly really from a mental health perspective, it was just the perfect thing to do for us. At the time, it was a thing that structured our weeks, and and we could just, you also had the time and the space to think about it in a way. I don't know if I could have.
One of the things that came out of the lockdown in general was that I think a lot of us started to take our mental health a lot more seriously. I don't think, because we've never lived through anything like that before, where everything just stopped like that, I don't think any of us were really equipped to deal with it. Especially, I would imagine people like us who are busy creatives, where we're also thinking about the next project, even when we're working on the current one. There's always something to do. One of the things I like about this industry and this job is that I've constantly got new clients and new couples to work with. I've got new issues and problems to solve. I've got new ways to shoot. I mean, there's 100 ways to shoot a wedding. That's what I find interesting. I know to some people from the outside looking in, it might look like quite a boring industry. I think it's the complete opposite of that. I think it's completely challenging all the time from a creative perspective and a mental health perspective, challenging. But yeah, when lockdown happened, it was strange for us to just stop like that. And I know that we weren't the only ones that suffered. I mean, I say we suffered. I mean that contextually. Obviously, there was people out there who suffered a lot, far more than we did. But I think from a point of view of our mental health, it was really difficult. And so I think keeping busy, doing things, great idea. And I think when you started the podcast, amazing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with not having a full on 5-year plan. People always say you need these plans for things. Sometimes you just need to do something and see where it goes. And that's as exciting as anything. So the fact that you're still doing it now and it's so popular, I mean, and you're talking at the photography show next year, aren't you? So, I mean, that's unbelievable. Look how far you've taken this. I mean, it's brilliant. Yeah.
It's that's one of the most incredible things really about this is the amount of opportunities that it has opened up, and ultimately I just sit in my living room talking to people every week. That's basically what I do. But it's opened up a lot of doors, and it's created a lot of opportunities. And I think that's but I think ultimately, actually, to be honest with you, it's just created a sense of community, because the photography world is a community, regardless. And there are places like the photography show or shows like that. That's a great opportunity for people to come together and meet up, because on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, photography can be a very solitary profession because, you go out, if you're most wedding photographers that work on their own, you're a one-man band. You go out, you shoot the thing, and you go back and you edit, and then you deliver to the clients. It's not like you're not rocking up to an office with lots of other human beings every day.
Oh, I have this conversation with my friends all the time about the weird idiosyncrasy of this job, because one minute there's 100 people surrounding me at a wedding, and because of the way I shoot weddings, I bring a lot of energy and fun, and I'm buzzing around because I want to say high. Yeah, high is probably a good word actually, but I get like a natural high from that. I've always been quite extroverted in that sense, and I get excited by that. When things are going on, that helps me produce my best work. But I go from that to then sitting in my office for 5 days on my own, talking to my cats, and that's literally, it's like one extreme to the next. So I find that really strange. It's a strange part of our job. But yeah, and again, I think, going back to lockdown, I think that's what was so difficult, because I was used to seeing lots of people in short bursts, and that's a really good way of doing it, because then it gives me time to recharge my social battery. I might be extroverted, but there's certainly introvert aspects of my personality. I would say I'm an extroverted introvert in reality, because I do need my time to myself. I do need that time to recharge. So that was what was really difficult. But yeah, doing weddings especially is weird like that. There's no consistency in sense of who you're going to interact with, and yeah, so it can be really solitary. And the other thing is as well that you don't often get a chance to interact with other photographers, because if you're working at a wedding, you're the only photographer there. I guess that's the same really for corporate work. If you're the only photographer, one thing I liked about shooting music work, for example, you go to a gig, there's sometimes 10 photographers in the pit, and you can have a chat with them and you get to interact. I've met some long-term friends in pits in gig venues, and we bonded over the shared hate of the band or shared love of a band, so it's quite funny in that sense. But yeah, weddings aren't really like that. You spend a lot of time on your own. Yeah, it's strange. It is strange, definitely. Yeah.
During lockdown, I think this is something I've talked about many times on this podcast, but during lockdown, I took on some jobs that I wouldn't have ordinarily taken, and also I think jobs that I wouldn't have ordinarily been offered, just because it's not necessarily part of my wheelhouse.
Sure.
But one of the things I did was I shot some products, right? So they sent the products to my house, I shot them, I delivered the images, no problem. And it was just a way to just cushion the blow a little bit. But I very quickly realized why I love shooting people generally.
Yeah.
It's because it is really very boring. When you're on your own, and you're shooting some box or some products, and you go like, man, that thing doesn't respond to my jokes. It's like, and so that was.
You hit the nail on the head there with why we choose different types of photography. I'm a people person, definitely. I might need my time away from people sometimes to recharge my social battery, but I'm a people person, and I got into photography, shooting bands and shooting gigs and being around that buzz of the social aspect of humanity, and that's my big buzz really in photography. I like shooting people, so I had the opportunity possibly of doing product photography over lockdown myself, and I turned it down because I know my heart's not in it. It never has been. I've tried to do a bit of it. I've done some for some friends if they asked me to, little bits and bobs, but my heart's not really in that. But what I did do, an opportunity came up from the local council to do some teaching to children, some photography teaching online, and ended up having a little class of kids, about 10 kids, all doing a photography project over 6 weeks. When I got to set them a little idea, I was like, I'll say, right, I want you to go and take a photograph using a perspective. I want you to take a picture using a landscape photograph. I want you to take a portrait of one of your friends or something like that. Absolutely loved that. I got to interact with them all the time. So we'd have a little video screen. I'd be chatting to them individually, setting them individual tasks. Then when they did the photos, I'd give them some individual feedback. I absolutely loved doing that. But I think it's because I had that connection, and I got to speak to some of their parents as well. And they were brilliant. And one of them actually came on one of my photography beginner courses recently, just because she liked what I taught her little one during lockdown, which is crazy. So yeah, I'm definitely, it's the human aspect of photography that really I find most interesting, definitely.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. You can put photographers into one of two categories, those who shoot humans and those who don't. And there's, people have their reasons why they like. I mean, I had a conversation actually. I was running a studio lighting, portrait lighting workshop last night, and so I had a conversation with some of the participants in there, and really, it's interesting because some people, the reason why they don't like to shoot people, it's mainly because of that, communication part of it, like where they feel awkward or they just don't feel like they don't, you know what it's like. It's like sometimes some people just don't feel like they can make that connection, or it's harder for them to connect with the subject, and so they're more comfortable shooting some inanimate object because then they don't have to communicate with it.
You can actually apply that same kind of thing to weddings as well, because I would say and I'm going to generalize a little bit, but the vast majority of documentary photographers I know are very introverted, or quite introverted in general. And one of the reasons I think they've gone down the documentary route is because it's a better way for them to interact. They're still interacting with people. They're still shooting, and they still love taking pictures of humans and what humans are doing, but they just don't want to get too involved on a personal level. I mean, on a personal level, I mean on a one-to-one basis. And I think that's one of their skills. I think that's why they see weddings the way they do. And I think some of them are so immensely skilled at that. And I'm trying to bring some of that into my work, but I think it's funny because I feel like maybe I'm not a natural documentary photographer for the reason that I do like interacting with humans. I do like having conversations with people. I like to go to a wedding and chat to people and get involved. I feel that's why they relax around me and I get such brilliant candid stuff. But documentary photographers seem to do that without that. So there's no right or wrong in photography in so many ways, But yeah, I do think that, some people don't want to photograph humans, and that's fine. And I'm glad that they don't, because some of them are amazing landscape photographers or whatever kind of photographers, But the human element is really important to me. But yeah, it's interesting. It attracts so many different kinds of people, so many people that are creating so many different ways. And also the way we perceive things is entirely different as well. So the way that we're going to see the world for our cameras is entirely different. So that diversity is incredibly important, I think. And also one of the reasons why photography is such an important art form.
The thing I've always loved about your photography and your style, and actually full disclosure for those of you who haven't listened to Camera Shake episode 2, which is Why Haven't You? Go check it out right now. Be amazed about how low the production quality was back then. But anyway,
probably about the same quality as my video camera, right?
but so full disclosure, you shot my wedding, and I tell you the reason, and we talked about this before, but the reason why I decided to get in touch with you when it came to the point where I had to kind of figure something out in terms of photography, was because I really like your music photography. We have a mutual friend who plays in a band, and I remember seeing some of their photography, and my first thought was, "Oh, cool! Who shot that?" And then you gave me your name, and I'm thinking, "Cool! I'm just gonna get in touch and see if because I didn't know that you shot weddings at that point, right?"
Right. Yeah.
And so I just got in touch, and I basically, what I wanted was really somebody who can really be a fly on the wall, and that was sort of my idea. I wanted it to be relatively easy, no like the whole wedding was not like a high effort kind of thing. It was meant to be just like, let's make this as easy as possible, because at the time
it was awesome. It was like a little DIY effort, but it was so cool. It was
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it was, because I didn't want to do any planning. you know. And and the thing was, so I in a previous life as a musician, I played many, many, many weddings, probably I don't know hundreds, possibly thousands of weddings, you know. And so I was kind of weddinged out when it came to that. And my wife, who had already been married before, she already had the big wedding. So she was like not really interested in having a big wedding either. And so we figured, well, let's just do like a small thing. And I think the original idea was we're just gonna have a barbecue, and then we're gonna go to Germany and we hang out with my German relatives and we have a barbecue there, and then we're gonna go to Canada. As it happens, my wife I was born in a place in Canada that's literally just like 40 minutes away from where my relatives live. And so we decided we're going to go to Canada, get all of our folks together there and have a barbecue there. So the idea was really just to have 3 barbecues, and that was going to be it.
3 barbecues.
Yeah, and so that was the idea until all of our British relatives went, "Oh, barbecue in Germany, we're coming." And so that it turned into this, oh shoot, okay, so now it's all right, so now it's a different thing. But the thing I loved about, not only about your photography style, but also about the way that you just are as a person, was that, and again, it's a story, you know, forgive me, listeners and viewers, if you've heard this before. I've talked about this many times before, but just for those uninitiated, you know, I'll just tell it so very quickly. It was our wedding day was the wettest August day since 1945. It was chucking it down. It's unbelievable. You know, we had these like fluffy ideas of going to this bridge over a canal, you know, like this oldie worldy, like Victorian, I don't know, bridge thing. And you know, the idea was, oh, it's going to be a beautiful day, and then we're just going to take some portrait, you know, some shots on the some couple shots on the bridge. And that was going to be it. But on that day, it was chucking it down. It was raining, cats and dogs, as they say over here. And it was crazy. And really, I was ready to. And it was like a, what was it, like a 10-minute walk or something from the house to.
Yeah, we had to go. Yeah, I remember the day very well. Actually, that weather was horrendous.
Well, it was nuts. And so, you know, I had to kind of go across a farm to get this bridge and all the rest of it. So in my mind, I was like, okay, let's scrap that idea. Let's not, I mean, it's obviously not going to, and, you know, I was thinking about my wife's wearing dress and all that kind of stuff. And so I was already sort of married to the idea of just giving up on that. And I remember talking to you, and you turned around and said, I'm up for it if you are.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at,
I'll get wet. I don't care. I don't care if I get a bit wet. It's all about the photos. Like, it's about the moment. You got to embrace it. You live in England as well. Like, you could get, I always joke, you can get weather like this long. I think about your wedding all the time when I talk to my couples, and I'm like, it can rain in August. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, it can tip it now. You know, you just got to embrace it, because that's the day. If you don't embrace it, you're going to not ruin your own day, but you're going to, you can certainly ruin your own day, actually, by thinking that there's nothing you could do about it. You just go out and embrace it. It is what it is. It doesn't matter, because you got married. That's what really matters. But for me, that's an opportunity to do something interesting and cool. And from what I remember, we got some awesome pictures, despite the weather being rubbish, you know?
Well, I think we got some awesome weather. We got some awesome. No, we didn't get awesome weather, but we did get some awesome pictures, and I think we got some really unique pictures, and that was precisely because it was chugging it down. And this is the thing that sort of occurred to me afterwards, was that, and this is also one of the reasons why we love those pictures so much, and we look at them very, very frequently, you know, is that they're so different. I think had it been a nice sunny day, which, let's face it, doesn't really happen over here. Well, occasionally it does. But, you know, but had it been like the perfect day with the Simpsons clouds in the sky and all that kind of stuff, you know, these images, I'm sure they would have been great, but they would have been relatively normal. The fact that, you know, my wife was wearing her wedding dress and wellies, and, you know, we had an umbrella, and it was literally, you can see the raindrops in the air. I mean, you can see it's chucking it down, and, like, you know, we're drenched and all that kind of stuff. It really made for really unique images.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, photographer, it's the kind of thing when I started out that would have scared me, like, oh my god, the weather, like, you know. I think now, because I'm an experienced shooter, I just see it as an opportunity. So for me, it's like, well, let's do something different then. Let's not get concerned about what we could have had. Let's shoot what we can, you know. I don't know what photography is. They said it to me at a conference years ago, or they did it in a talk, and they were basically like, you have to remember to shoot the wedding you're at. And I think that's an incredibly important bit of advice, because I think sometimes when you built up in your mind, like you're going out, it's August, it's going to be beautiful, you're at a lovely place. And where you took us to do these photos was absolutely beautiful, with that canal and the rain and stuff. It was trains, wasn't it? It was a train line. It was a canal. It was a canal.
It was it was a canal. Yeah, it's very.
I started to doubt myself for a minute then. Yeah, it was a canal. It looked amazing. I actually think the rain made it better. I think it made it more interesting. And I think because you guys embraced it, and you didn't let it bother you, I think that's why I love the photos so much. And I remember when I first put them up on my Instagram and stuff. Do you remember everyone was going crazy about them because they loved them? Because it is the kind of thing that can go wrong. People can just say, "Oh, we don't want any pictures," or it's like when I shoot a wedding these days and I get a bride who's more interested in. Well, actually, I don't get this anymore. This is probably quite a telling thing, actually, about the way I shoot now. Sometimes you get a bride who's more interested in making sure her dress is still white than she is about going out and getting involved and having some fun and getting some great pictures. I mean, that's your prerogative. I totally understand it. But my point of view from a photographer is like, well, you can clean your dress, but you're not going to get an opportunity to take photos on this day again. So why don't we go out and embrace it? And that's what I try to do. That's always been my attitude. I think in the face of that kind of adversity, there's always opportunity to do something awesome and memorable. And that's kind of what I try to do. So when couples say to me now, "Oh, what do you do when the weather's bad?" I'm like, well, one, I'm a shooter in England, so it's not like this is unusual. And the other thing is, well, I'm like, I'm always going to be like, let's go and do it. Unless it's like so horrendous that you literally can't get out. And I've had a few like that as well. But even then, there's opportunities. We've got brollies, we've got parts of a venue you can use. For me, it's just, go out and make the most of it. Don't let that dictate what you do on a day.
Yeah, and that's really, I think that really speaks to your just personality to be that upbeat and positive, even when, because this is the thing, you plan something like a wedding and then something goes wrong and your mind is sort of stuck on, shit, that's not the plan, rather than thinking...
I am panicking, don't get me wrong. Well, yeah, I don't want my couples to know that. And also, because I really believe, like I said before, there's opportunity still. But I think actually a big part of my job, if I'm honest, is to help to keep my couples calm, and also help them get excited when they need to be excited. So I think from my point of view, it's like you'll never really know how I'm feeling inside if I think something's a little bit, oh no, because I'm always like, well, we just got to go out and do it. And the amount of times when I've been like, oh God, I'm not sure this is going to work. But then I just go out and do it. And it always does. It always works. You always get something. I'm a big believer in that. But sometimes you just got to take the chance, even if you're not 100% sure about it. Yeah.
And also, I think as a wedding photographer, I guess you have to go through these, you have to sort of encounter these problems in order to actually know what the solution is next time round. I mean, it's just a matter of gathering experience, I suppose, over the years.
Oh, of course. I mean, and experience, we know from every industry, experience is so incredibly key. It's, having talent and all that kind of thing, that's the kind of thing we can debate, but experience, have longevity in the industry. One thing about weddings that I think what's really good about weddings is that it throws up so many different problems and conundrums and different situations. You learn a lot about photography, shooting weddings, an awful lot about what you're good at and what you're not good at, and what you can get better at. And because of the frequency of weddings, if you do this full time, you have lots of opportunities to get better at things or to approach things in a different way. So if you feel like you didn't maybe nail it the last time, you've got an opportunity sometimes the next day or not far away to take a slightly different approach. And over a period of time, you begin to work out what works and what doesn't. Some of that is kind of based around your brand of photography, if you like. Some photographers, like if you're a documentary photographer, you might not get that much involved in that sense. You kind of let your couple make the decision about what they want to do. Someone like me, though, whereas I'm a bit more of a hybrid of that, I'd always say to them, well, if you want to go out and do this, let's go and do it. I always say the same thing, if you want to do it, I'll do my best to do the best I can do. So that's really all anyone can ever ask of you, I think. And that's all I ever ask of myself, try to be the best photographer I can be under the circumstances.
How has your approach to weddings changed from when you first started? How many weddings have you shot by now?
Well, it's interesting, actually. I had to think about this really recently because I've just been asked to be a speaker at a photography conference, and they wanted to know how many weddings I shot. I've tried to estimate it. It's well over 600. It might be even more than that. mainly because I've been shooting. I put on my thing over a decade. It's actually longer than that, and I used to average over 60 weddings a year. I've dropped that down recently, but yeah, it's going to be in the region of 600, I think, if not more than that. So that's quite a lot. But I would say then the main difference really is when you first, and I'm sure you got experience of this yourself. When you first start into the industry, you take any booking that pretty much comes your way. You're trying to establish your business. You don't maybe always have an established style when you start out. You're just trying to make your business viable. So I would say what I started out was I was a bit more traditional than people think. I very quickly went down the alternative route, mainly because most of my mates and the people that booked me to begin with were alternative people. I was in bands. I shot a lot of music. Well, a lot of my original weddings came from the music world. It was people in bands that were getting married who knew me from the music photography. That is how I got into weddings, actually. It wasn't my plan at all. It just happened like that. But what I've begun to realize over the last few years, and especially the last 4 or 5 years, and I say this because it's sort of true, but people laugh at it. I don't think until just before lockdown or around lockdown, I started to take this as seriously as I have been. It's not that I wasn't serious about it, but I just felt like my mindset changed, and I was like, actually, I really want to do this properly. And what I mean by that is I want to actually have a distinguishable look and brand and feel, and when people talk about ideal clients, I would say it's not so much ideal clients for me as it is types of people that I like to attract. And I guess that is an ideal client to a certain extent, but I don't want it to be that specific. There's a lot of diversity in the weddings I shoot. It will go from little DIY weddings like what you had yourself, all the way up to grand weddings in crazy places that are very regal, But one thing that is really consistent about the weddings I shoot is the types of people that book me. And I think that's because of the way, I think it's partly because of what I show, but I think it's just partly because I've really lent into my personality being a huge part of my brand. And the reason why I shoot the way I shoot.
I mean, that's interesting because, of course, on one hand, you've been able to develop your shooting style, over the years. But do you think weddings in general have changed at all, or?
Yeah, I think they really have. I think what would have been alternative just a few years back is now what I would just call modern wedding photography. And I think I'm sat somewhere in that. I'm not as alternative as I once was, mainly because I think weddings have gone a lot more down that route of being a little bit more, I don't want to say alternative, actually. Maybe that's the wrong word. I think maybe couples are just not having the weddings their parents did. And for a period of time when I got into the industry, they were just having weddings, like what their parents did. That begun to change. And I think that really helped me establish my business because I shot slightly differently at the time. It's not like I don't worry about being different these days in that sense. I just worry about being authentic and genuine and people understanding why they're booking me and what they like about my work. It's really important to me that they understand that. But what I think is really important is realizing that when people are booking you to shoot their wedding, they're booking you as a person as much as anything. They like your work. That's why they're going to contact you. So by the time I've got them on a Zoom call, they're already invested. We just need to make sure we're the right kind of people for each other. And I feel like that's where that's a strength of mine. I would never say to anybody, and I mean this very sincerely, oh, I'm good at photography and I'm really good at weddings. But what I would always say is this: I'm confident that I'm very good at capturing joy. I'm very good at helping people relax. I'm very sure of myself in the sense that I attract the right kind of people and that they like me for who I am.
What is it that attracted you to weddings to begin with?
The money.
Straight up. That's it.
No, honestly, I had no plans to be a wedding photographer. What actually happened was someone from the music industry asked me to shoot a wedding, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I imagined I would. And then it actually kind of run from there and got a bit out of hand, which is why I said to you before about taking it seriously. Is I've begun to realize I use a lot of music analogies, and I think one of my favorite analogies is: do you want to be a bass player in a band, or do you want to play bass? Because anyone who plays guitar, for example, could play bass in a band. But if you want to be a bassist, that's a bit different. It takes a lot more skill and a lot more commitment. And I think I realised that I really need to do weddings properly. That's what I did for weddings. That's how I got into it. It wasn't really my plan, but once I did get into it, I decided if I was going to do it, I needed to do it properly. And it's one of the best decisions I ever made. I think a little while back. I don't know if it was before I shot your wedding or around that time. I'm trying to think. If you don't mind reminding me, what year did you get married? I've forgotten.
It's 2017. I'm very confident about that. It was 2017,
Wow.
but my wife's not listening.
Before then. So a few years before that, I was just about to turn 30, and I got offered the opportunity to go to work for a magazine in London as one of their staff photographers doing music stuff. The money was not great. And I made the decision there and then to not do it and to concentrate on weddings because I felt like there was more future in that. I was concerned about the publishing industry anyway because that was in decline. But I also thought if this opportunity came around like when I was 21, I wouldn't have minded. I would have rented a room in Camden and slummed it out and had an amazing time. Turning 30, trying to change my mind about stuff like that. I need to start thinking about my future. And I had shot a few weddings at this point and begun to realise that I enjoyed them a lot more than I ever imagined I would. And so I thought that in that case, I'm going to throw myself into this. But I also thought I could build a little niche for myself, shooting slightly alternative weddings with mainly because of the people I want to attract. I want to attract nice people that are getting married for the right reasons, who are having nice fun days, who aren't going to try and micromanage everything, aren't going to micromanage me. Let me do my thing. And are going to enjoy having someone like me around on their day. And I feel like that's my big USP, actually. I feel people kind of connect with me as a person, and then that leads to them connecting with my work. It makes more sense to them when they know me, I think. And one of the things I say to people on my Zoom chats, like the last bit of advice I say to my couples before they leave the chat, it's not about paying me or booking me or anything like that. I always say to them, just go back through my Instagram and see yourself and your guests and family in my images. And what I'm trying to suggest to them is that if they see the characters that they know in their lives captured, but in a way that I capture them, that's how they see them, then I'm probably the right photographer for them, because that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to float around trying to capture personalities, because that's something I think I'm quite good at. Again, not down the whole like, oh, I'm good at photography thing. It's more of a practical thing. Like, I just feel that's something I'm quite good at in relative terms. Yeah.
A little while ago, I had a friend of mine on the show, Simon Turner, and so the thing for him was he was just starting out. He just set himself up, or he set his business up. He's been a photographer for a long time, but I think it's the first time he set himself up in like wedding photography in particular. And it's an interesting episode because he was talking about on one hand the trials and tribulations of getting started in that industry, but also then the mental anguish that caused, and the worry about not knowing how to pay the next amount of friends and stuff. And to be honest, I mean, I've actually felt he's done a really good job, given that he'd been in business for like, I think, under 6 months or something at that point. But when you decided that weddings was going to be the thing that you were going to go for, what did you do to sort of grow that business in the beginning?
That's an interesting question, actually. So I was working part-time when I first started doing the photography as a more serious thing. I was actually working part-time in Peterborough at a nightclub called Club Revolution, where I was the booking agent. So I come from the music industry. I'd worked in PR and A&R before, and the photography, of course. And then I started working for a venue as a booking agent. So I'm booking bands, putting on gigs as a promoter. What was really good about that, I was just part-time, but it also allowed me the opportunity to develop my photography side of the business, so I could start pushing it forward. So the first few years of doing weddings, I only did a handful. And then what actually happened was I shot a mate's wedding and I put them all up on my Facebook page at the time. And then a lot of people who knew me from my music work were like, oh, you're doing weddings now? And I was like, yeah, I'm doing weddings. So I put a package together for like £800, I think. Might have even been less, might have been £600 for like full day. And I think in the space of about 2 or 3 weeks, I took 20 bookings for the following year, which is absolute madness. But that's exactly what happened. And then I looked at it and I realized that this time next year, I could then just do this full time and start pushing it. So that's exactly what I did. So very quickly, I went from no weddings to about 30 weddings to about 40, 50 weddings. And then it just carried on like that. And in the local area, Peterborough, I just got so busy, really, really busy. And again, I think a lot of it was to do with my personality, really. I've said this to another podcast before, and I actually mean it. I think my personality bought me a lot of time to actually learn how to do photography. Because I didn't really know what I was doing when I started out. I'd only second shot for 1 or 2 photographers as well. Because a lot of people tell you to go second shoot for another wedding photographer to get experience, which is great advice. But I'm also seeing it from the other side of it now, where I'm established and I'm charging really good money for people to shoot their weddings, and I find it really difficult to take somebody with me as a second who doesn't know anything, like I didn't know anything, because it's too important. And also, if I'm charging them for a second, I need somebody who can do a certain job for me, especially with the fact that I've got a more distinguished style now. I have certain things I need, which a beginner would struggle to just capture for me. So I understand that's a really hard thing to sort out. But I didn't really do that. Yeah, I just went straight into it. And I just think I was lucky, really. It could have gone wrong. It could have gone badly wrong, because I really didn't know what I was doing. But I was a pretty quick learner, and I had couples that really bought into me, I think, and I think that brought me a lot of goodwill. And it also, and I mean this as well, I think I realised that I wasn't good at certain things, and I worked really hard to get better at them. But whilst also appreciating that whilst this was going on, I was trying to develop my own way of shooting and own style. I didn't want to copy anybody. I wanted to be inspired by them. So trying to get that balance right was difficult to begin with, especially when you're starting out and you're not sure about yourself and you're constantly undermining yourself when you're looking at other people's work. I'd get in and I'd shot a wedding in the Fens somewhere, which is, as flat as anything. And I'd be like, oh, I'll smash that. And then I'd get in and look on Instagram and I'd see another picture from someone in the mountains in America with a couple with this epic sunset picture. And I'd be like, why am I even trying to do this? I'm never going to get to that level. But you realise how silly that is to do, how futile it is to compare yourself to people like that, because that's just not how it works. No.
Yeah, I mean, I have some friends who live in very exotic locations. I know a couple of wedding photographers in Florida, for example, and like their beach shots are freaking amazing. Do you know what I mean? Like the coastline and you go, well, they just can't do that over here. Or maybe you can if you live in the right place.
Well, it goes back to that whole bit of advice I got given: the shoot the wedding that you're at, and I think that's so important. One, because you need to give your couples the attention and the respect that they deserve for their wedding. Just because it's them having a small wedding or an inexpensive wedding doesn't mean it's any less than another wedding. That's just that's a mindset. I know some photographers pitch themselves in completely different ways. If you're like a high end fine art photographer and you're charging 10 grand a wedding or whatever, I understand that you've got a different client base and they're going to have a different view on things. I appreciate that, but I realized a little while back that what I really love about weddings is the people and the types of people that I attract. That's what keeps me involved and keeps me motivated and keeps me inspired. And some of those, I mean, I know some of the weddings I've shot, and I did, just for full transparency, I charged £2,000 for a day, but for quite a long period, I was 1,600 to 1,800 for the last few years. And even at that price, I was often their single biggest expense outside of the venue. Sometimes I was even more than the venue because they were having a small wedding. So I was a big commitment for these people, and they believed in me and they trusted me and they wanted me to shoot their weddings. And that meant so much to me. And so that inspired me really to just keep getting better and keep trying to bring my A game to every wedding, which again has come to that point now where I'm starting to do less of them because I want to keep up that energy and creativity. I don't want to burn out, and the money doesn't motivate me as much as it did back then when I started. It's more about balance now. So I always try my best, and that's one thing I can always say to anybody. Like I said, I don't like saying to people, I'm good at photography or I'm good at this. But one thing I can tell you 100%, with 100% sincerity, is I always give my best. I always try my best at every wedding I do to understand what my clients want, but also to give them the best of me and what I'm good at. And then I just hope that that's enough. And thankfully, so far, touch wood, it has been.
Do you sometimes have to reject a potential client because you think it's like, well, that's absolutely not a match?
Oh, totally. I don't use the word reject though, because that's a bit negative. Although you're absolutely right. Yeah, I definitely. It's one of the reasons why I Zoom or meet my clients. I mean, before COVID, I used to meet virtually all my clients. That doesn't need to happen anymore now. I usually Zoom them. I've usually got a better connection than this though, so the picture's better. But I Zoom my couples and we have a conversation, and I think I work out in the first few minutes if we're the right fit for each other. Am I going to be the right person for them? And I definitely have. And another photographer friends of mine will tell you this because I've sent couples to them. After Zooming a couple, I'll get a feeling if they're right for me or I'm right for them. And if I'm not right for them, integrity is so important. I think it's incredibly important in our industry. I don't want to just take a booking these days. I mean, I understand as well from a point of view of being an established wedding photographer that I can make those decisions these days. When I started out, you know, I had to take every booking that came my way because I was trying to establish my business, but I'm not in that position anymore. And I can afford to be picky. But also, even more important than that, I need my couples to book the right photographer. It's too important of a day for them to get that wrong. And I'll let you into a story, into a little thing that happened this year. I had a lovely couple, chatted to them on the Zoom. We connected really well. And I had a good feeling about them. But a month out from their wedding, which was meant to be this year, the bride sent me a really lovely message, which must have been difficult for her to send. But she basically said, since she'd booked me and she'd got obsessed with wedding photographers, she'd kind of not changed her mind about me as a photographer, but she realised that her vision for her day had changed. When she originally booked me, she said she wanted all candid, natural, nothing really posy, all that kind of stuff. But by the time the wedding was coming along, it turned out she wanted something completely different to that. She wanted a very highly controlled editorial style wedding where everything was about the details, and you know they spent a lot of money coming up with a theme. And I think she realised that maybe that wasn't my strength as a photographer. I'm actually better at that than maybe even I realised myself as some of my more recent weddings have come. But it's certainly not something I sell myself on. And I knew it was difficult for her to send me that email, but I really respected her for doing so, because I said, well, that's really important, because if she hadn't have done that and then I'd gone and done a normal thing and she hadn't got what she wanted, she can't do that day again. And it would have caused problems for her and me. So I said to her that I totally understand that. And that's at the heart of my business. It has been for a long time. I think it's really important that my couples get this right. So I do always say that. And I've been told by photographers that, you know, aren't you bringing an element of doubt into their mind by doing it? I might be, but I believe in myself enough that I think that I can do it. And I'll say to them, you know, go back through my Instagram, make sure you're really happy with what I do. Make sure you know how I shoot. You know, I'm quite open about what I do and don't do and what I'm good and not so good at doing. And I think, and I say if that aligns with their values, then we're going to be great. I mean, another thing I'll say to them as well is something like, you know, I like a sunset picture as much as the next person, but if I ask you and you're not interested, I'm not going to make you go. They're your wedding photos. They're not mine. If you want me to do it, I'll smash it and I'll do my best I possibly can. But I'm not going to drag you off the dance floor to do something for me when you don't want me to do it.
That's the importance of putting the client in the center of it rather than imposing your own ideas onto the client. I mean, it's interesting, you know, because obviously your shooting style is very different from a lot of other, I call them standard wedding photographers. And of course, everything on your website, for example, also is sort of geared towards that. That's what I really like about, you know, your website. Everything is just a little bit, you know, everything's a little bit different. It's a little bit, I mean, I'm using that term, alternative. Everything's a little bit just not your typical wedding website. And it really it hangs together as a brand really well, you know, and
yeah. I like that you've said that, because the branding thing, right? I'm one of those people that hates corporate talk and all that kind of stuff, but my brand is I know the importance of it. I'm not totally unaware of it, but my brand has come around completely naturally, because I think, again, I've lent into my personality. I've realized that it's really important to be authentic as a person. And I think I'd like to think I'm a fairly authentic person. You know what you're going to get. And I think with my branding, I think I realized that the best way for me to connect with the right kinds of couples is to just be honest about who I am. I think people can read my website and see my pictures. They've got a pretty good feeling of what I am straight away. Yes, I appreciate it's going to be slightly different to your standard wedding photographer, whatever that is now, and that's constantly changing as well, isn't it? But I think people are going to know really quickly if they like what I do. And again, I'll go back to another little thing that happened in my career years ago. I may have even spoke to you about this before. It wouldn't have been on the podcast, but it might have been another time. But something happened which was quite funny, and it pushed me along this route of actually just believing in myself a bit, even though that's kind of ironic and funny, because I'm full of self-doubt and I've got massive imposter syndrome, but I back myself. I have to, even though I find it uncomfortable to do it. But I think it's important to do so. I'd put up a picture of a bride and a bridesmaid with double chins. I found it hilarious. It was a really funny picture. It wasn't flattering in the slightest. And I did double check with my bride that I could do it. And she said, yeah, do it. I love that picture. And I stuck it on my Instagram, and I instantly got a message from another photographer. I won't out him, but he messaged me and he said, you can't put up pictures like that. It's very unflattering. You know, you're going to put off 90% of people. And I remember thinking at the time, that's amazing. I don't need 90% of clients. I don't need 10%. I need like 1%, 0.33% or whatever of the however many 100,000 weddings that are happening in the UK. And I thought it would help me attract the right kind of people, and it did. It blew up on Instagram. People loved that picture, and I think what it set out for me when I saw that happen in my mind, I was like, I need to be braver, and I need to be a little bit more. I need to be a little bit more concerned with posting things that I love, that I think people are going to connect with, that really let them know who I am as a photographer, so that no one books me by accident, you know. And the thing that's happened since then, one, my brand has become more established. Yes, I've fortunately gone on to win some awards and had that kind of recognition, which is absolutely lovely. But I think more importantly, it really set out who I'm for and who I'm not for. Actually, who I'm not for in probably in more defined terms. Actually, but yeah, and it's worked. I love my couples. I just don't get problem couples. I don't have issues with my couples. They know what they're booking. We have really good fun. They love what I do. They love our personality. No one's surprised by the way I shoot. I don't get messages from you. I thought you were going to do this. I don't get any of that. And I put that down to the fact that I'm very open about who I am. And again, I don't think anything that's got anything to do with necessarily how good you are at photography or how good I am compared to other photographers or that kind of. I think it's about people knowing what they're booking, and knowing who I am as a person, and that coming across in an authentic way. Hopefully, I think that's part of the reason why my business is doing so well. Yeah,
it's all really about that matchup between photographer and the right client. Because you're right, you don't want all the clients, you don't need all the clients, you just need the right clients. That's the thing. I see that in the headshot market all the time. I never really understand why somebody would give me a call and ask me to basically shoot what's effectively a passport photo. That's not what I do. That's completely not what I do. And and I'll pass those people on.
I think because of the way I shoot now, I don't get what I call speculative inquiries. So people that inquire with me now have already invested in me in some way. They're either my whole business is essentially built on referrals. It has been since I started. I don't do SEO or any of that kind of stuff. I'm rubbish at being consistent on social media and posting. I think I've had one Google inquiry in 3 years. It's just not how I push my business. So people that inquire of me have had a proper look and they know what they're going to get. And one thing I like about my inquiries is that they nearly always reference something very distinctly me, either a particular photo or something that or often it'll be couples that met me at other weddings and they'll reference the wedding they were at and how they thought I did something funny, or they loved the pictures that I'd taken or something like that. And I think for me that's really lovely because it feels like I've built this myself, and I often get other photographers ask me, how did you get these bookings, or how do you do? I don't really know. I do instinctively know, but I don't know how to explain that to people. It's just something that's always worked well for me. And again, I put it down to the fact that I think I'm quite an honest person, and I put integrity at the heart of my business. And so I've got no qualms about saying to somebody, I'm not the right photographer for you. I've passed on many bookings to other photographers that are a little bit more traditional than me, if you like, or because what does happen with referrals is someone will say to somebody, I know a photographer. The couple will then send me a message, but they haven't actually done any other research. I haven't looked at 5 photographers. I haven't really worked out what they want. And then they'll talk to me, and then I'll realize really quickly that actually they're looking for something that I don't do. And so rather than me just take the money and shoot the wedding, I will say to them, actually, I think you might be better off talking to this photographer because they do that kind of style of photography way better than me. And I think you're going to enjoy your photos more. That's happened multiple times over the years.
Is there anything you would think about, or anything you'd want to maybe in the future pivot towards, like, I don't know, destination weddings or something? Is there something that's in the back of your mind, or you think like, well, one day that would be a great sort of next step?
Yeah, do you mean in photographic terms? Yeah, that's interesting. I don't actually know. It's interesting actually. I have thought about this. I've spoken to my wife about this. I feel like doing this job takes up so much of my bandwidth in my brain. Doing it to the best of my abilities, constantly trying to learn new skills, trying to get better, be consistent as well. It takes up so much energy that I struggle sometimes to think outside of it. That being said, I do have unfinished business with music work. I definitely have unfinished business with portraits. And so I feel like I'm going to be doing some more of that over the next few years. It's one of the reasons why I'm reducing my numbers down, to give me the space and the time to do more of that. I also wonder about what AI is going to do to our industry. I feel like at this moment in time, we're protected in the sense that we still need to turn up at a wedding and physically be there. I don't know if couples are going to want a robot with a camera to come and do their wedding photos, but you never know. But I also think there's going to be a premium on authenticity going forwards and real moments when we're living in a world of AI. So that could work in our favor. On the flip side, we could see a deluge of people entering the industry from other parts of the industry that have been really affected by AI. So we might just get overwhelmed. It might get totally saturated, and it's a fairly saturated market as it is. So I'm obviously thinking about the future, but oddly enough, I think if I pivot, it might be away from photography and to do something entirely different. I have actually been thinking about going back to college part-time to do some courses in completely unrelated subjects to this. So I'm always thinking about that. I'm at that point now. I'm 43 now, so I'm at a point where I'm also thinking, can I still see myself running around like a lunatic when I'm 60, taking photographs of young couples? I'm not sure it's viable. I don't know, but we'll see. But yeah, I am thinking about other things, definitely. I guess that also means what does the next level mean to you? So for me, like next level to me would just be getting better at what I'm already good at, and maybe be able to increase my prices because I've earned the right to do so. That's probably next level for me. But at the same time, I'm also quite happy living small, because I have these conversations with people that are always like, we need to expand, we need to grow, we need to grow it, we need to make this bigger. And I'm like, I'm quite happy not doing that. I like my life, and my balance is really lovely. I love my business. I don't see a need to make it bigger. Like, I've had people that are more business minded than me say, why don't you bring people under your brand as different photographers? And I'm like, because I am my brand. It's me. I can't. Other people can't do. It's not they can't do it better, or even they just can't do it the way I do it, because I'm me. And when people book me, I want them to get me. It's the reason why I don't associate shoot for people, or let people associate shoot from me. I mean, maybe under an emergency situation, fair enough, to not let a couple down. But I've had people approach me and ask, can I associate shoot for your brand? And I'm like, no, like I don't want to go down that route. I'm not obsessed with this idea of getting bigger, or expanding the business, or making more and more and more and more money. Like I never have been. I just want to have a nice life and feel comfortable and happy in what I'm doing. And I feel like I've got that balance really well at the minute. But there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, people have got different plans, different ideas about what makes them happy. But I guess, again, that goes back to like couples though. Couples have got different ideas of what a wedding day should be, and how they can be happy. And that's what I love about the wedding industry. It's brilliant like that in that sense. The diversity is insane, because it makes sense if you think about it. All different kinds of people, and all different kinds of people get married. So why shouldn't that be reflected? But from my point of view, yeah, I've never had that kind of. I don't know if motivation is the right word. I'm a motivated person, but I've never been motivated by that kind of growth. The kind of growth I want to see is more of a personal growth in myself. It's not really about finances. I've actually explored the possibility of investing with a mate into another business, and then I just thought to myself, I was looking at it realistically, and I was like, this is going to take up the time I don't already have, and there's going to be no benefit to it other than some bragging rights to say, look, I could do this and I could do that. And it's like, for me, it's like we're all motivated to do different things. I mean, the reason, for example, that I'm doing less weddings is because I want the time to do other things. I want to be able to read more. I want to be able to listen to my records a bit more. I want to see my wife a bit more. I want, I'm making all this money doing something I love, which I'm very, grateful for. And I know it's a first world problem, but not having the time to enjoy it sometimes is what causes me a bit of anxiety and stress. And this is a high pressure job as it is. Looking after people's wedding days. Being the point of contact on a wedding day. A lot of the weddings I shoot, I pretty much run the whole day for the couple. It's all based around what I'm doing for them a lot of the time, and I don't realize how stressful that is sometimes until I'm driving home and I'm like, I can't believe I've gone through a crazy 12, 14-hour day where everything's been full on. I don't really know that I want to do more.
You're absolutely right. It is about creating that balance, and I can see that with all the things that I do. For instance, the podcast is one of those things. I'm constantly looking at refining the workflow and blah blah, and making, sort of creating more time for myself that I can then do other things with. And even if that's just watching Netflix, or hanging out with my wife, because as much as like I'm doing the day job, like I'm doing the podcast and all the rest of it, I also like to really stay married. That's ultimately that's the bottom line.
It's funny you should say that, because on my website, when there's a little bit about me, basically I put a thing on there basically saying, I don't want my wife and my cats to leave me, so I need your money, so I will work for it. Something along those lines. And again, I mean that quite sincerely. Like, yeah, I like my life, but I also find that, I get it. Some people are so good at just being work focused, and that motivates them. That gives them happiness. My work gives me an immense amount of happiness, but I also appreciate that there's a mental health cost to that. And I think in my mind, the balance is so important, because I find that when my life's better balanced, I'm actually better at photography. I feel like I relax a bit more when I've had enough sleep, because I'm not constantly stressed. I produce better. My creativity is better when I've had an opportunity to do something outside of weddings for a little bit of time. Like I'll go to a museum with a mate, or hang out with somebody I haven't seen for a long time, and I feel like invigorated again, socially, and then I get excited again about going back to my job, because I've had a little break from it. I think sometimes you get tunnel vision with it, and I think it could be detrimental. I think it could be counterproductive, But again, that's only how my brain works. Other people work in different ways, but that worked for me, and I think that's really important. I think it's really important to know what you're good and not good at, and then apply that to your business, so it makes your business as best it can be. If I could be half as good at running my business as I am good at photography, I'd be so much better as a business.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
I'm not a very good photographer, but I'm much better at photography than I am at being a business person.
Because I remember, it's like I have this thing. I hate spreadsheets. I can't. I'm not that person, right? If you make me look at a spreadsheet for longer than 30 seconds, I go legitimately nuts. But unfortunately, when you run a business, that's kind of part of it.
Just highlight one of the funny things about photography. I think from people from the outside looking in, they think our job is just running around taking pictures and having a good time. And that is a part of our job. But I reckon actually taking photographs is about 10% of what I actually do as a photographer. The rest of it's taken up by editing and admin and marketing and web design. We're all wearing many hats doing this business. And I struggle with all those things just so I get that 10% of time to take photos and do what I actually really love. I've got no real love of editing either, not bulk. I like individual editing images, but bulk editing, that really, I find that difficult at times. I find it hard to concentrate for long enough to want to do it. I have to break it down into little parts. But actually going out with my camera, that's what really motivates me. That's what I love to do. But to be able to do that as a business, well, you have to have a business, and then as that can take up all your energy and time, and to the point when you go out with your camera, you're not motivated enough, or you haven't got the inspiration. And I found shooting so many weddings that I was spending so much time indoors editing and not going out shooting because I had to get these deadlines, get these, that kind of robbed me a bit of my love of what I was doing, which is why I've started to do less. Again, I've got nothing but respect for people that could just smash them out, edit them, bang, on to the next one. If you could do that, more power to you. I just can't do that. And I noticed that. And so I think for me to protect the quality of my work and to protect my ability to attract the right kind of clients, I needed to make some changes, so I did, and it's working for me. But again, that's about knowing yourself and the experience, like you mentioned earlier about experience. That's where experience is so important, and also recognizing that you work differently to other people, so you don't need to compare yourself to the guy that's shooting twice as many weddings as you, or twice as less weddings as you. It's really about the balance that you need. I know photographers that only shoot 20 weddings a year, and they don't want any more than that. That's what they can cope with. That's what they can deal with. That's what they want. And if their business is running well and it's doing what it wants it to do, then they're right. There's no hard and fast rules in this thing. And I think, if anything, I'm very suspicious of photographers that tell you have to do it this way. It's the only way, because I just think that's rubbish. There's never just one way of doing something ever.
Yeah, that really doesn't work in any business. Just generally, I think in life that just doesn't work, because everybody's got a personality, and and certain things. Right. Certain things that they like doing, and other things that they don't. That's just some people. I know wedding photographers don't edit at all. They just outsource all of that.
I've explored that myself. It just didn't work for me, so I decided to do it myself. But it means that that there's a limit of what I want to do. And again, it works for me. Everything's about balance, and the balance at the moment is very good. And I'm really happy with it. But that could change really quickly. And ultimately, I guess because I'm established, I've been in it for as long as I have, I do have that luxury of being able to pick and choose a bit more than some others. Once I hit my numbers, I can say no. That isn't always the case for a lot of photographers, especially those who aren't getting enough work for whatever reasons, which is often not to do with how good they are or not the photography, as you know. So I don't take it for granted either. But I want to protect it as much as I can. So that means me doing the right things for myself and for my business, because ultimately I am a business. So if it's right for me, it's got to be right for my business too.
Also, that sort of wisdom of realizing the importance of balance in your life is something that often comes with age. I didn't think like that when I was 25. When I was 25, I was like, I was working like 3 days without sleep, and then and so it was. It's different, but now
you highlighted something really interesting there. I think the idea when I was 25 that I might have my own business would have absolutely I would have laughed hysterically. Now that I'm in that position, I've been doing it for quite a long time. Yeah, your perspective on things changes, and experience is so important. But also, getting to know yourself is really, really important. And knowing what you're good and not good at, basically everything we spoke about. But it is true that sometimes you need to be brave enough to make those decisions. And I also think we're living in a time when we're in a bit of a mental health epidemic, I think, in our country. I don't know we're the only country suffering from this, but we certainly are, and it's been highlighted a lot since lockdown, I believe. And I think people are not getting that balance right. And I think people are trying to get that balance right. I think that's why we've seen a big explosion in people working from home, or trying to get that hybrid model of working, where they get a bit more time, because they're realizing that the work-life balance is just so heavily skewed towards helping your employees and not you. And I appreciate that, there's a big debate to be. I don't want to open a big can of worms about this, but I do think that that having a work-life balance or having an ability to have an influence on that is a big reason why people go into an industry like ours. I know from my perspective, learning about myself and the way my brain works over the last few years, I think it makes sense that this business and this industry works for me, because I've always struggled in 9-to-5 environments. I'm not massively consistent with being able to concentrate on certain things and then work to deadlines, and I'm not great with my timekeeping and all that kind of thing. But what I can do is I can get that right for about 40 times a year when I shoot a wedding, and the rest of it I can work around. I can work around that. I can have a bad day if I need a bad day. I can have a mental health day if I need a mental health day. And then I get days of hyper focus when I can smash out so much work and be massively productive. Or I know, for example, I'm much more productive in the evenings than I am in the morning. And so I tend to not go in my office too early, because I don't see the point in it. I'll get as much work done going in later than I will by sitting in there all day and all night. But I have the ability, being my own boss, running my own business, to make those kind of decisions. But it's certainly made for my life to be a lot more enjoyable, and the balance to be much better, and makes for me, from a mental health point of view, to have a better time of things than some others. And I don't take that for granted at all.
That's a super important realization about yourself as well. Just to know when you function at your best. I mean, it's very similar for me. I'm really good between 5 o'clock in the morning and 8 or something, and then like later on in the evening. And one of the reasons for that is that there are considerably fewer distractions. Like for me, everything's a distraction. Like I'm like the squirrel dog, So. And that's a problem when during the day, like when the phone rings and there's like, you get notifications on your screen, or like the postman comes, or the rubbish collection people, the dog barks or whatever. Is everything to me is a distraction.
Well, if you actually look for distractions, that's kind of the problem. In fact, I don't know if you'll be able to see this because my webcam being so rubbish, but I've got this thing called a Pomodoro timer.
Oh. I've tried that.
Yeah, Pomodoro method to get work done. I have to, because I can't concentrate enough. But I can do little spurts of it, and that makes me super productive. And I started using that, and it's been a game changer for me. And also, the other thing I like to do is have documentaries on or podcasts. So a little bit of a distraction helps me concentrate, because I can't sit in silence. Because if I sit in silence, I'm looking for distraction constantly.
Yeah. So I found this too, and it's actually made me wonder whether I might be autistic or something, because I literally need to listen to something all the time?
I'll say a little bit in that I was talking to a psychiatrist about depression and anxiety. I've had depression issues. I get SAD, so this time of year is quite difficult for me. But SAD and anxiety have been a problem in my life for quite a long time. But over the last year of talking to him, the whole conversation has switched into talking about ADHD, character traits, behavioral traits. And so, and again, I don't want to go down this route of self-diagnosis. There is talk at the moment of getting a diagnosis for it. But what I found really interesting about it is that it's forced me to read into it a lot more. I bought a couple of books, and I recognise so much of myself in what is being told and said to me about what these things are, and that these things which I used to put down to me, that's just the way my brain works. So, I'm not very good at this, I'm not very good at that, beating myself up over things that I can't control, struggling in normal work environments. I realised I've made a lot of changes to my behaviour over the last 10 years to try and mitigate some of this stuff. And I believe a lot of it is to do with the fact that my brain just doesn't work quite the same as someone else, and that's okay. That's absolutely fine. And I don't necessarily need someone to say to me, you've got ADHD. I don't want to go on medication for it, because I think a huge part of my creativity, in a way, that is all the things that are good about what I do are partly because of this. But yeah, he's been pushing me to go down this route of getting diagnosed, because he's pretty convinced that I've got it. He does specialize in it, and he's pretty convinced that it's part of my character, and that's why I have these kind of weird things that I do. So I recognize that in myself, but I already made the changes. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, but it might be something you might want to look into yourself, because I think the more I think about it, how whole industry is full of people like this. Like it's the more I talk to people about it openly, the more they tell me they're exactly the same. And there's something in that. That's not a coincidence. I think I think people that are creative like we are, and want to work like this in a way that other people would struggle. That's the reason why I believe. Let's just say, for example, that that he's right and I have got ADHD. I said I haven't decided if I'm going to go down the diagnosis yet. I don't know. What I do know is this: reading about it and changing my behaviour of certain things has been a massive benefit to me. So even if I am technically not, or I don't hit all the parameters to be diagnosed as such, it's certainly made my life better. Understanding it and getting my head around it and having people I can talk to about it, and so for that, it's got to be good. It's got to be good. And I don't necessarily feel like I need to go down this route of saying, oh, by the way, I've got it. But I think for other people, it'd be massively helpful if they could get diagnosed, because I think for some people, being medicated or having someone to talk to about it or having that diagnosis would be massively helpful to them. It's a spectrum. I've got a lot of mental health issues, and in that sense, so it might be that I'm low on it, or other people are high on it. I mean, that's either way though. But it's brilliant to talk about, and I think it's something that so many people in our industry are going to be able to relate to, because so much of it will resonate with them in the way they work.
Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on the show. I'm sure it won't be the last time. Let's not make it another 230 episodes.
No, I'll try to get a better internet connection next time, so it doesn't look like I'm filming this for a potato.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. It was fantastic having Dan back on the show. You can head back to episode number 2 to check out our first conversation right at the beginning of this podcast. Let me know if you think it's improved since then. I'd love to hear your thought, or would I? I don't know. Let me know what you think. If you enjoy the content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/CameraShake to help us keep bringing more amazing episodes to you. It really means the world to us. And for those of you who are listening on audio, did you know there's a fully flashed out video version of this podcast over on YouTube? Well, you should by now, because I keep mentioning it all the time. So go and check that out. You'll get to see all of our guests' stunning photography in full Technicolor over there. So, all you have to do is jet over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you can watch all of our episodes on there. And if you're already on YouTube, be sure to drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring that bell, share with your friends, all that thing. Do all the things that people tell you to do. Fantastic. Your engagement does help us reach more people all across the globe. And I, for one, I'm always amazed where people are when they listen to the show. It blows my mind every time. In fact, if you are listening up to this point, then you're pretty much invested. Get in touch. Let us know where you are, because, like I said, it's a super interesting thing for me. Thanks again for listening and watching. Remember, a new episode drops every Thursday, so make sure you mark that in your calendars. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.